A single steam boiler on a wagon could transform a mining camp from hand labor to industrial output in 24 hours. By 1880, portable steam engines had multiplied frontier productivity by 100 times. Yet the myth of the Wild West still shows cowboys and prospectors working with pickaxes and hand tools. The court records, patent filings, and census data tell a different story. This wasn't the primitive frontier Hollywood sold you. This was America's first distributed industrial revolution. The mathematics were brutal and simple. One man with a flail could thresh 7 bushels of wheat per day. A 10-horsepower portable steam engine could thresh 700 bushels. That wasn't an improvement. That was a different category of human capability, and these engines went everywhere, mounted on skids, pulled by horses, small enough to ford a stream, powerful enough to hoist 1,000 pounds of ore from a 500-foot shaft. The question isn't why portable steam transformed the West. The question is why we forgot. August 14th, 1881. Deadwood, Dakota Territory. Morning temperature 68 degrees at 6:47 a.m. when the wagon train rolls past the Gem Theater. 4 freight wagons, each pulled by 8-horse teams. The lead wagon carries something that looks like a horizontal iron barrel with a smokestack, mounted on oak runners. Behind it, a cylindrical boiler, 16 feet long. Crated machinery, leather belts coiled like sleeping pythons. The men watching from the boardwalk don't cheer. They calculate. Every sawmill owner in the Black Hills knows what's arriving. A portable steam engine, 20 horsepower, made by J.I. Case of Racine, Wisconsin. Shipping manifest says it left the factory on July 2nd, reached Pierre by steamboat August 1, and spent 12 days on a bull train to get here. The purchase price was documented at $1,740, equivalent to what 3 skilled miners earned in a year. John Morrison's sawmill has been cutting timber for the Homestake mine using a water-powered sash saw. On a good day, with the creek running high, his crew of 6 men can cut 2,000 board feet of lumber. On a bad day, when the creek runs low or freezes, they cut nothing. Morrison himself does the books. He knows his numbers. His mill cuts an average of 200 board feet per day, accounting for breakdowns, weather, and the seasonal variations that make water power a gamble in the Black Hills. The steam engine won't care about the creek level. It won't care about winter. It won't freeze. According to the manufacturer's specifications, which Morrison has read so many times the paper is soft as cloth. This engine can run 16 hours a day, driving a circular saw through ponderosa pine at 800 revolutions per minute. The manufacturer claims output of 8,000 board feet per day with a crew of 4. Morrison doubts that number. Manufacturers always exaggerate. But even if it's half true, even if it's 4,000 board feet per day, his labor costs get cut in half while his output doubles. The mathematics aren't complicated. What costs $2 in wages per 1,000 board feet drops to 50 cents. What takes 6 days takes 1. But the initial calculation isn't the revolution. The revolution is what happens when that same engine finishes sawing in September and gets loaded onto a wagon to spend October threshing wheat 50 miles away, then returns in November to power a stamp mill crushing ore, then goes back to sawing in the spring. 1 engine, 4 applications, moving every 3 months. In 1881, there are 42 portable steam engines operating in the Black Hills. By 1885, there will be more than 200. They'll saw lumber, thresh grain, hoist ore, pump water from flooded shafts, power stamp mills, drive drilling equipment, and crush rock. The entire economic model of the frontier is about to change, and it will happen so fast that by 1890, no one will remember what it was like before. To understand what portable steam engines did to the frontier economy, you need to understand what they replaced, or more accurately, what they didn't replace, because in most cases, there was nothing there to replace. The frontier ran on muscle, human muscle, horse muscle, ox muscle. And muscle had a brutal problem. It ran out. A man could swing a pickaxe for 8 hours if he was strong. He could turn a hand-crank pump for maybe 4 hours if he had endurance. He could work a 2-man crosscut saw through a ponderosa pine for 6 hours if he had a partner and they traded off. But the output was always measured in hours of human exertion. The cost was always measured in wages per man per day, and the limiting factor was always how much pain the human body could tolerate before it failed. The numbers expose the gap. In 1870, the average wage for a miner in Colorado was $3 per day. That same year, coal to fuel a steam engine cost 45 cents per ton in the coal fields. A 10-horsepower portable engine consumed approximately 1 ton of coal in 10 hours of operation. For 45 cents in fuel, a steam engine could do the work of 40 men. Even after adding the engineer's wages, the maintenance costs, and the depreciation on the equipment, steam was running at 1/10 the cost of human labor. But cost wasn't the only factor. Consistency was. A man got tired, a man got sick, a man quit. A man demanded higher wages when he knew you needed him. A steam engine delivered the same horsepower in hour 16 as it did in hour 1. It didn't negotiate. It didn't slow down. It didn't care that it was Sunday or that the temperature was 105 degrees. As long as you fed it water and coal, it worked. The manufacturers understood this. By 1869, the J.I. Case Company had produced its first portable steam engine specifically designed for agricultural and frontier applications. Unlike the massive stationary engines powering factories in the East, these were built to move. They sat on wheels or skids. They weighed between 2 and 6 tons, heavy enough to be stable, light enough to be hauled by an 8-horse team over primitive roads. The typical setup was elegant in its simplicity. A horizontal locomotive-type boiler, 12 to 16 feet long, topped by a vertical or horizontal cylinder engine producing 10 to 20 horsepower. A flywheel 3 to 5 feet in diameter. A belt pulley to transfer power to whatever machinery needed driving. Total assembly time at a new site, 4 to 6 hours. 2 men with hand tools could uncrate it, mount it, connect the belt, fire the boiler, and have steam pressure in time for an afternoon's work. This portability created a new economic model. Instead of building permanent industrial infrastructure at every remote site, impossible in a territory where timber camps, mining claims, and homesteads appeared and disappeared within months, you brought the power to the site, extracted the value, and moved on. The steam engine became a kind of industrial mercenary, working for whoever could afford its services. Threshing crews in Dakota Territory operated on this model. A crew of 8 to 12 men would own a portable steam engine and separator, traveling from farm to farm during harvest season. The farmer provided the grain and labor to pitch bundles. The crew provided the machinery and expertise. Payment was calculated per bushel threshed, typically 3 to 5 cents per bushel, compared to the 50 cents per bushel it cost to thresh by hand. A single crew could thresh the harvest of 20 to 30 farms in a season, covering hundreds of miles. The first portable engines reached the frontier in the late 1860s, hauled west by rail to the end of the tracks, and then by wagon to their destinations. By 1870, scattered reports mentioned steam sawmills in Colorado, steam threshers in Nebraska, steam hoists in Nevada. But these were novelties, expensive experiments by well-capitalized operators willing to gamble on new technology. What changed in the 1870s was scale and price. Competition among manufacturers drove costs down. In 1869, a 10-horsepower portable engine cost approximately $1,200. By 1875, that price had dropped to $800. By 1880, to $600. At the same time, reliability improved. Early engines had a reputation for boiler explosions, broken valves, and catastrophic failures. By 1880, standardized manufacturing techniques and better metallurgy had made them dependable enough that a competent engineer could keep one running for months without major repairs. The result was an explosion in adoption. In 1870, census records document fewer than 50 portable steam engines operating west of the Mississippi in frontier territories. By 1880, that number had grown to more than 2,000. In the Black Hills alone, the count went from 0 in 1876, the year gold was discovered, to 42 in 1881, to more than 200 by 1885. Early users were concentrated in 3 sectors where the productivity gains were most dramatic: agriculture, mining, and sawmilling. Each sector had its own dynamics, but all shared a common pattern. The engines arrived first at the largest operations where capital was available and the scale made the investment obvious. Then they cascaded down to smaller operations as prices fell, and the competitive pressure became unbearable. If your competitor could thresh wheat for 3 cents a bushel and you were still paying 50 cents for hand labor, you either bought a steam engine or went out of business. The expansion created its own infrastructure. By 1880, every rail town of any size had at least one dealer selling portable steam engines, boilers, and parts. Fargo, Cheyenne, Denver, Deadwood, Rapid City, Bismarck, Spokane, all had businesses devoted entirely to steam power. They sold engines on credit, they provided engineers for hire, they stocked replacement parts, they offered repair services. An entire secondary economy grew around keeping the machines running, and the machines needed keeping. Boilers scaled up with mineral deposits and had to be cleaned. Bearings wore out, belts broke, gaskets failed. But the manufacturers had learned from railroads that part standardization was the key to remote operation. A broken valve on a case engine in Deadwood could be replaced with a valve from Fargo, from Cheyenne, from the factory in Racine. Interchangeable parts weren't perfect. Hand fitting was often required, but they were close enough that a competent mechanic could make repairs in the field. The result was a network effect. The more engines in operation, the easier it became to keep them running. The easier it became to keep them running, the more attractive they became to new buyers. By 1882, the pattern was self-reinforcing. Steam power was spreading across the frontier faster than railroads, faster than telegraph lines, faster than towns themselves. Wherever there was work that required power, a portable steam engine would appear within months. Remember that sawmill in Deadwood. In August 1881, John Morrison's water-powered operation was cutting 1,200 board feet per day with 6 men. The portable steam engine promised 4,000 board feet per day with 4 men. Morrison took delivery, fired the boiler on August 15th, and had the engine operational on August 16th. His crew spent 3 days learning how to feed logs, adjust belt tension, and maintain consistent steam pressure. On August 20th, they cut 3,600 board feet of lumber in a 14-hour shift. On August 21st, they cut 4,200 board feet. Morrison kept detailed records. Over the next 60 days, his average output was 3,150 board feet per day. His labor costs dropped from $18 per day for 6 men to $12 per day for 4 men. His fuel costs, coal delivered to the mill site, ran bound $80 per day. Total operating cost per 1,000 board feet dropped from $15 to $3.60. He had paid $1,140 for the engine. At a savings of $11.40 per 1,000 board feet and producing an average of 115,000 board feet per month, the engine paid for itself in 4.2 months. That's the baseline story. 1 mill, 1 engine, 1 careful operator keeping detailed books. But multiply that story by every sawmill in the Black Hills, and you start to see the cascade effect. Morrison's lumber cost $35 per 1,000 board feet to produce and deliver to the homestake mine. His competitors, still using water power or hand saws, were charging $45 to $50. Within 6 weeks, 2 of his competitors had ordered steam engines. Within 6 months, 7 more sawmills in the Black Hills had converted to steam. By 1883, every major sawmill within 50 miles of Deadwood was steam-powered. The same pattern played out in threshing. In 1878, hand threshing with flails dominated the Dakota Territory. A man could thresh 7 bushels of wheat per day. Larger operations used horse-powered treadmills, where a team of horses walked on an inclined belt that drove a threshing mechanism. A good horse team could thresh 50 to 75 bushels per day. Then the steam threshers arrived. A case 10 horsepower portable engine driving a separator could thresh 700 to 1,000 bushels per day, depending on the grain variety and moisture content. The crew consisted of an engineer to run the engine, a separator tender to manage the threshing mechanism, and 6 to 8 men to pitch bundles, haul away grain, and stack straw. Total daily wages, $24 to $30, output, 850 bushels average, cost per bushel, 3 to 4 cents. The mathematics broke the old model instantly. A farmer with 500 acres of wheat, a typical homestead claim that had been under cultivation for 5 years, would harvest approximately 7,500 bushels. Hand threshing would require 171 man-days of labor at $3 per day, 3,213. Horse-powered threshing would require 100 to 150 horse days plus operator, approximately $600 to $800. Steam threshing would require 9 days of crew time at $30 per day, $270. By 1880, hand threshing had effectively disappeared from commercial wheat farming in Dakota Territory. The only people still threshing by hand were subsistence farmers with a few acres who couldn't justify hiring a steam crew. Everyone else either owned a share in a steam thresher or paid a traveling crew to come thresh their crop. But here's the detail the history books miss. These weren't dedicated threshing machines. The same portable steam engine that threshed wheat in September would be hauling ore in October. The crews understood this. They operated year-round, moving the equipment from application to application. Thresh grain in autumn, saw lumber in winter, pump water from mine shafts in spring, power stamp mills in summer, move every 3 months, always moving. A detailed record from a threshing crew operating out of Fargo in 1883 documents their year. August 15th to October 10th, threshing wheat at 47 farms in a 60-mile radius. Output, 42,000 bushels. Revenue, $1,680 at 4 cents per bushel. October 15th to December 20th, sawmill operation cutting timber for railroad ties. Output, 485,000 board feet. Revenue, $140 at $4 per thousand board feet. December 28th to February 15th, ore hoisting at a silver mine in the East Black Hills. Daily rate, $35 per day. Revenue, $1,715 for 49 days. February 20th to April 30th, stamp mill operation crushing ore. Per ton rate, $250. Tonnage crushed, 840 tons. Revenue, $2,100. Total revenue for 1 steam engine, 1 crew, 1 year, $7,135. Fuel costs, $620. Repairs and parts, $340. Labor, $2,880 at $8 per man per day for a crew of 6. Net profit, $3,595. Return on investment for the $800 engine, 449% in year 1. Those numbers explain why portable steam engines saturated the frontier so quickly. They also explain why they disappeared from historical memory. These weren't monuments. They weren't permanent installations with plaques and dedication ceremonies. They were tools. They moved constantly, wore out, got replaced, got scrapped for parts, got abandoned when better technology came along. The stationary steam engines that powered factories, those survived, got preserved, ended up in museums. The portable engines that actually transformed the frontier? They worked until they died and then got melted down, but the impact remains visible in the productivity numbers. In 1870, the Dakota Territory produced 2 million bushels of wheat. In 1880, 28 million bushels. In 1890, 45 million bushels. The population increased, yes, but not by a factor of 22. The land under cultivation increased, but not by a factor of 22. What changed by a factor of 22 was the productivity per acre and the speed of harvest and processing. Steam power made that possible. In mining, the transformation was even more dramatic. Before portable steam hoisting engines, the practical depth limit for a mine shaft was about 200 feet. Beyond that, the labor required to haul ore to the surface by hand windlass or horse-powered whim became prohibitive. Hoisting 1 ton of ore from 200 feet required approximately 6 man-hours with a hand windlass or 2 hours with a horse whim. At 300 feet, those numbers doubled. At 500 feet, hand hoisting became economically impossible. Portable steam hoisting engines changed the mathematics. A 20-horsepower engine with a direct drive drum could hoist 1 ton of ore from 500 feet in 4 minutes. In an 8-hour shift, a single engine with a 2-man crew, 1 engineer, 1 skip tender, could hoist 60 tons. That's 480 man-hours of hand-windlass labor replaced by 16 man-hours of skilled labor. The deeper the shaft, the more dramatic the advantage. The result was a race to depth. The Homestake mine in the Black Hills sank its first shaft to 250 feet in 1878 using horsepower. In 1879, they installed a portable steam hoist and went to 400 feet. In 1880, a larger hoist took them to 600 feet. By 1882, they were at 800 feet and extracting ore from depths that would have been pure fantasy 5 years earlier. The gold didn't get richer deeper down. The technology just made it accessible. The same pattern repeated in copper mines in Montana, silver mines in Nevada, lead mines in Colorado. Wherever a deposit extended below 200 feet, portable steam hoists appeared and the shafts followed. By 1885, the average producing mine in the Western Territories operated at depths between 400 and 600 feet. By 1890, several were past 1,000 feet. None of it would have been possible without portable steam. The water pumping application was equally critical. Every deep mine fights groundwater. Below 100 feet, most Western mines hit water-bearing strata. The standard solution was a system of hand-operated or horse-powered pumps, lifting water in stages through a series of sumps. It worked, barely, but consumed enormous amounts of labor. A typical 300-foot mine required 3 pumps operating continuously, 2 horse teams working 12-hour shifts, 3 men per shift. That's 6 horses, 6 men, just to keep the mine dry. A portable steam-powered pump could do the same work with 1 engineer working an 8-hour shift. Some mines ran the pump unattended overnight, banking the fire to keep steam pressure at a low maintenance level. The labor savings were so dramatic that by 1883, essentially every mine in the West below 200 feet had switched to steam pumping. Hand pumps survived only at shallow diggings where the capital cost of a steam engine couldn't be justified. And then there was mobility. Remember that these engines moved. A mine would open with hand labor, hit water at 150 feet, bring in a portable steam pump on a temporary basis, dewater the shaft, assess the ore body, and decide whether to continue. If the ore was rich, they'd buy or lease a permanent steam plant. If the ore was poor, they'd shut down, and the portable engine would move to the next prospect. This created a rental market. Operators in mining districts would own a fleet of portable engines and contract them out by the day or week. Daily rates in 1883 ranged from $15 for a small pump to $35 for a large hoist. By 1885, the industrial transformation was complete. The frontier still looked like the frontier: rough towns, muddy streets, canvas tents, and log cabins. But the economic model underneath had been revolutionized. Portable steam engines had saturated every sector where muscle power had been the bottleneck. Agriculture, mining, lumber, construction, all had converted to steam. The productivity gains weren't marginal. They were order-of-magnitude shifts, and they happened in less than 15 years. The mythology of the Wild West never caught up. The pulp novels and later the movies kept showing cowboys and prospectors with hand tools. But the actual economics of frontier development after 1880 ran on steam. Those portable engines, pulled from site to site on wagons, fired with wood or coal, tended by men who understood boiler pressure and belt tension, they were the real agents of change. Not the gunfighters, Not the cavalry, the engineers. Here's what the census records show and the popular histories ignore. In 1880, the Western Territories employed approximately 12,000 steam engineers, men whose job was running and maintaining steam engines. That's more than the total number of sheriffs, marshals, and cavalry troops combined. These men earned $4 to $6 per day, well above the average wage, because their skills were in constant demand. They moved from job to job, following the engines, accumulating expertise in a dozen applications. They weren't romantic figures. They wore grease-stained canvas coats. They carried wrenches and spoke in technical language about boiler pressures and bearing temperatures. But they held more economic power than any gunslinger because they controlled the engines, and the engines controlled the productivity. A good engineer could get a bulky engine to run reliably for months. A poor engineer could wreck an engine in a week through neglect or incompetence. Mining companies, lumber operations, and threshing crews paid premium wages to keep good engineers because the cost of downtime far exceeded the cost of higher wages. This created a knowledge economy that paralleled the tool economy. Engineers traded information about which engines were reliable, which manufacturers stood behind their warranties, which modifications improved performance. They shared solutions to common problems: how to prevent scale buildup in hard water, how to patch a cracked cylinder head in the field, how to improvise parts when the supply chain failed. This informal network of expertise was as important to the spread of steam power as the engines themselves. By 1890, the portable steam engine had become so common that it stopped being remarkable. No one wrote newspaper articles about a new thresher arriving in town. No one kept detailed records of sawmill productivity. The engines were just there, doing the work, moving from site to site, breaking down and getting repaired, wearing out and getting replaced. They had become infrastructure. And then they disappeared. Not physically, not immediately, but from memory. The reason is simple. Starting in the 1910s, gasoline and diesel engines began displacing steam. Internal combustion was lighter, started faster, required less skill to operate. By 1920, the manufacturers had stopped making portable steam engines. By 1930, most had been scrapped or abandoned. By 1940, they were curiosities. And by 1950, when the first serious histories of the Western frontier were being written, the portable steam engine era had been almost completely forgotten. What survived in historical memory was the preceding era, the era of hand tools and muscle power, and the subsequent era of internal combustion, the 30-year period when portable steam dominated. It got compressed into a transitional footnote. The cowboys and prospectors with pickaxes became the iconic images. The engineers with their portable steam engines became invisible, but the evidence remains in the productivity numbers. Between 1870 and 1890, the Western Territories underwent an industrial transformation as dramatic as any in American history. Agricultural output increased by factors of 10 to 20. Mining output increased by factors of 15 to 30. Lumber production increased by factors of 8 to 12. None of those increases can be explained by population growth or land settlement alone. They required a massive increase in energy availability, the replacement of human and animal muscle with mechanical power. Portable steam engines provided that power. They were the distributed energy grid of the 1870s and 1880s. They went everywhere, powered everything, and transformed the economics of frontier development. They were, in the most literal sense, the Industrial Revolution coming to you, loaded on a wagon, hauled by horses, set up in a day, ready to multiply your productivity by a factor of 100. And then they got scrapped, forgotten, and written out of the history. What survived was the myth of the primitive frontier. What died was the memory of the first distributed industrial revolution. The final irony is this. In 1881, John Morrison's sawmill in Deadwood installed that portable steam engine for $140. The engine ran for 11 years, processing approximately 15 million board feet of lumber. In 1892, Morrison sold the mill to a larger operation, and the steam engine was moved to Montana. It ran there for another 6 years, then was sold for scrap in 1898. Total documented output over 17 years, 22 million board feet of lumber, plus 4 seasons of threshing, 2 seasons of ore hoisting, and miscellaneous pumping work. The engine that made all that possible, it weighed 200 pounds when it was scrapped. Scrap iron was selling for $8 per ton in 1898. Morrison's portable steam engine, the machine that had transformed his sawmill operation and launched him to prosperity, was worth 6 times 80 as scrap metal. That's what the frontier remembered about the technology that had built it. $16.80. Today, if you visit the Homestake mine or walk the streets of Deadwood, you'll find no memorial to the portable steam engines that made the town possible. The museums focus on Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane. The historic markers commemorate gunfights and gold strikes. The narrative remains locked in the mythology of the primitive frontier, but the census records tell the truth. In 1880, the Black Hills supported 42 portable steam engines. By 1885, more than 200. They sawed the lumber, threshed the grain, hoisted the ore, pumped the water, and multiplied human productivity by a factor that made industrial civilization possible in a place that had been wilderness 15 years earlier. They did it quietly, without fanfare, in the hands of engineers whose names no one remembered. The myth says the West was won with 6 guns and determination. The evidence says it was won with 10-horsepower portable steam engines hauled on wagons, operated by men who understood thermodynamics, moving from site to site, transforming muscle work into mechanical work at a ratio of 100 to 1. History chose to remember the Cowboys. Economics suggests we should have remembered the engines.